it's paying tribute to the necessity of understanding that planet Earth is not a freak of nature somewhere in the vastness of the universe, but it is the reality of manifestation where there is no center and periphery. And in that no center and periphery, in the homogeneity of awareness, all we have is this planet Earth. So it is literally here and now as planet Earth in both terms, as the final byproduct of that movement of our in awareness, and it's simultaneously that movement where that experience of the outer space that we all have. That takes us to the universal truth, aligned creation, and limitations. That's come from Ebony. It's a bit of a background, but large questions. More and more, I feel my will is merging with the collective will, deepening my reflections on the process of manifestation. As I explore my own journey, I find myself balancing personal experience with universal truths, embracing a more fluid way of being that allows both extremes, control and surrender, without being defined by either. And two substantial questions, paragraphs with many questions inside. And I feel like maybe it will be more fitting to give my reflections straight to each of these as I read, okay? I think this is maybe more fitting approach. So the first one, if consciousness is the first cause and our experiences are shaped by where we focus our attention, can we transcend the influence of astrology by withdrawing our attention from planetary forces? Does single-pointed focus on God lead to liberation from cosmic influences? If one individual transcends these forces, does the collective remain subject to them? Or could these limitations, when viewed playfully, serve as a purpose in expressing our divine essence creatively through them? Perhaps it's less about transcending and more about embracing these constraints as part of the unfolding universal self, a dynamic canvas for manifestation, where we learn to work with both extremes to manifest our desires. Yes, we can transcend the influence of anything, but that does not mean that we will be absolved from certain experiences, because our embodiment already is something that could be spoken of as a process, which could be spoken of as a manifestation of something that was desired prior to, let's say, existence of this body. Because we cannot here reduce this body and our aspirations and longings, our intentions and our, let's say, wantings, just based on how we are brought up. We know this is inconsistent even with clinical experiences of people, which are plenty out there. So I would like you to make this quantum leap in your understanding, so that some erroneous, perhaps, perspective doesn't slip in, that does single-pointed focus on God lead to liberation from cosmic influences? Single-pointed focus on God astrology, influence. Again, it's a one-man show. There is no influence in the cosmos on you. This is a concessional language. It's the first, maybe primary year in school. It's the, I don't know. This is not university, certainly not an academy. What is true at a certain level of understanding is no longer holds value when our understanding supersedes and expands. This is the very nature of all learning. What holds true at a certain level is then gets adjusted. Even some of the scriptures are expounded in that manner. Certainly the Bhagavad-Gita is known for it. The Bhagavad-Gita doesn't just whack one on the head with the ultimate truth, let's say, in the manner of Ashtavakra Gita or Ribhu Gita or other Gitas or other, let's say, Advaita scriptures. In the Bhagavad Gita, there is this stagely process of how different yogas are defined. And for that reason, Maharishi Mahesh Yogi personally, when asked which one is his favorite, Brahma Sutras or the Bhagavad Gita, he said both are extraordinary. But if one to speaks about the applicability in this life, then the Bhagavad Gita is more preferable, simply because it's more practical. Brahma Sutras are not practical. You can't live by Brahma Sutras, you see? And this is the biggest misunderstanding and a biggest maybe delusion of a lot of non-dual teachings, which are a kind of reformulations for the masses in that kind of neo-Advaita format, because they are not applicable in daily life. It's not meant to be in the first place. Whereas Bhagavad Gita is applicable. So with this out of the way, the influence of astrology is not on the fact or on account that the moon is out there and the sun is out there and there are flares on the sun, and it impacts our planet Earth atmosphere and our bodies, our physiologies, and moon there conducts all its, affairs by circumambulating the Earth, and that creates these nodes, right, known as nodes of eclipse, right, in Vedic astrology, known as Rahu Ketu. There's points of eclipses, right, where the moon forms. Well, depends where, right? So the lunar node and the south and north nodes, they are not happen out there in cosmos. It's in the realm of subject-object relationship. It's in the realm of Maya. It's in the realm of this space-time fabric. Yes, it rules. Yes, Maya is unapologetic. Astrology, the meaning of astrology is because it's here and now in the cortexes. Every phase of the moon, I don't need to look at the moon to feel it. Every flare on the sun is a flare in my own cortexes. Every Saturn gone retrograde, or every Sadasati, or that's how it related to. So that's the beauty of astrology, or the meaning even of astrology, properly understood, is not that it influences an individual living on the planet Earth. You see? So this is where I would like us to tweak this understanding. The influence of astrology is already the mere fact that I am, as awareness, experiencing myself, with this, you see, flesh, bones, bone marrow. That has very important also I would say, adjustment, because we no longer view astrology as something that influences us either directly or indirectly from behind the scenes or as a matter of fact, but rather that we are that reminder, a walking universe. And within that realm, we are as a body, this cosmic body. Of course, we can't walk around it all day long just thinking I'm a cosmic body. Although sometimes there are these visceral experiences, maybe for a period of time, maybe even as an insight, thrown there, and it can be greatly liberating, freeing, overwhelming, empowering, certainly empowering, because you don't feel anymore that you live life as someone subjected to external influences, impulses, and experiences. You are the light into yourself, the world into yourself. And so, in other words, that helpful understanding, that cosmic being, that meaning of the anthropomorphic being. And this why we used in our abstract for the song publishing company when we started on the website, why we call this as a return to the geocentric view of the world. Geocentrism there is not with regard to, let's say, going back to the Ptolemaic way of how the Earth in relation to the space was seen before Copernicus adjusted that. It's not done in view of astronomy. It was done in view of psychology more. It's paying tribute to the necessity of understanding that planet Earth is not a freak of nature somewhere in the vastness of the universe, but it is the reality of manifestation where there is no center and periphery. And in that no center and periphery, in the homogeneity of awareness, all we have is this planet Earth. So it is literally here and now as planet Earth in both terms, as the final byproduct of that movement of our in awareness, and it's simultaneously that movement where that experience of the outer space that we all have, just looking at the sky at night, Milky Way, planets, stars, this, that, astronomy is born. And, as a kid, of course, I was reading and dreaming and imagining how is that? What does it mean, travel with the speed of light? Well, we know it's impossible. The repercussions of that on the physiology of the body is such that it's not designed to travel with the speed of light. In fact, we can travel in Sushumna with the speed of light as awareness, but the body itself cannot travel in space in the speed of light. Doesn't matter what spacecraft we may create. This is the reality of the situation. Just as it's impossible to go be outside of the planet's atmosphere, because the radiation in the outer layers is so extreme that no object will ever survive us. No human form, no animal form will ever survive that level of radiation. But we don't want to get busy with that. What we want to understand is this question that you pose here in terms of influences. Can we overcome? Even the highest realized being is subject to the so-called prarabdha karma. That stream of karma, which is what gave that individual now what is also spoken of as a particular point of view in awareness. You and I are all particular point of view, and there is infinite points of view. Awareness is infinite. Therefore, it can afford to have infinite points of view on itself. And it does that beautifully. But once it's in the form, that form is subject to these very laws we spoke earlier when we gave analogy of a dancer or a martial artist, or a painter who knows that certain things cannot be mixed and matched because it doesn't work. I don't have knowledge enough, like if I was musician, sound engineer, I would have told you, well, not everything goes. There are, this is in, this is out, this is earthed, this has to go here. You can't just like everything goes. It's everything subject now to these laws that with which physical universe operates. And just like because of these laws, the being who is embodied, he's subjected to all this. So therefore, it's not, the secret is not to go beyond the constraints of these influences. If I may suggest, if it's can be spoken of as a secret, then it is in recognizing that whatever happens is an extraordinarily profound way of how that what otherwise is homogeneous beyond time and space has this unique moment in time of experience something, anything. And that, at the psychological level, if you will, means transcending the limitations imposed by anything. So our corporal bodies are not meant to be transcended so that we can walk through walls, or one can throw stones through us, or we are not influenced by any external whatever circumstances that may be imposed by divine bodies moving out of the space. But in the reality of day-to-day experiences that no longer confine us. And that's where the test is, always is. It's the only place the rubber hits the road is when we drive. That's the only way the rubber hits the road. So it doesn't hit the road where there are no laws of gravity, because that analogy will no longer mean anything. You need gravity and you need the wheel on the road for it to feel and for it to justify that analogy, which is a very, very often used, as you know, by me and by others. And that in itself is what happens to us on a daily basis in every circumstances, is what is transcended. There and then, when the transcendence and immanence begin to lose their original meaning. I would go as far as to say, when we forget about these terms altogether, they lose their meaning, our job is done. Then it simply lives itself in undefinable, inexplicable, extraordinary manner of fact. And that's all there is. Of course, we don't want to reduce this to the clinical experience of nothingness, and that you know very well that we do our utmost to debunk these perspectives, that this nothingness is not the goal, right? So, and we will move to the next one. Again, it's a chunky paragraph here. As creatives in a world dominated by limiting and dystopian narratives, is it our role to create more constructively, using our imagination wisely, knowing that the consciousness is the first cause? Perhaps we live in echoes of past imaginations. How do we then engage with deterministic systems, those that seem rigid, predetermined, or locked in metrics, like technology, AI, and astrology, while staying true to a higher divine purpose? Can we transform these forces into tools for higher good, ensuring our desires are guided by truth through self-reflection, alignment with core values, and inner wisdom, rather than mere good intentions? So how do we engage with deterministic systems that seem rigid, predetermined, or locked in metrics, like technology? AI and astrology, and you gave this as examples, while staying true to a higher divine purpose. Again, my suggestion, like invitation, to approach this with feet on the ground, understanding. Whatever may seem frustrating for us whenever we come across this, what seems rigid and predetermined, we shouldn't forget that the very, very nature of what is predetermined here and is seemingly locked in metrics. And you define this only in terms of, let's say, what could have potentially this anti-creative, uh, counter-creative, counter-artistic, right? I would suggest that at the very same time, we know if we have fire, then because of the very, very physics and what fire is, it can cook our food. It can boil water and one can have a boiled egg, right? So we know the outcome is predetermined because we know the property of fire. Do we complain about that? No. It's very, very comforting. We know, of course, that fire at the very same time needs to be handled with care because, well, for obvious reasons. So everything that you have mentioned here and everything that seems as rigid and predetermined could be applied to absolutely everything that exists in form. That one way or another is here already, even down to the elemental order. Fire was just one example. Everything that we use on that utilitarian level has that quality. The knife that cuts, right? It can cut in different way. Everything, the air we breathe. In other words, one can view life as already hazardous, embedded with the possibility. And quite frankly, it is. If we view this with healthy degree of that kind of down-to-earth understanding, why should it be safe? Life is where nothing is really safe, and we do our best to make it safe. So therefore, we know how to go about this. This is simply belongs to the department of organization. We're organizing, working with the laws of nature, working with them, and in fact, working to the best of our capacity so that there is continued understanding, you see? And what I mean is also by feet on the ground is that what you call here dystopian narratives, is it our role to create more constructively using our imagination wisely, knowing that consciousness is the first cause? Well, again, consciousness is not just the first cause. Consciousness is both cause and effect. Consciousness is not just cause. Consciousness is all there is. Again, if we are to apply monistic understanding, everything is consciousness, made out of consciousness. Yes, of course, one would not argue that the teapot on my desk now is as conscious and as aware as I am. But it is in the same field of awareness as I am. So therefore, as an object of my experience is not separate from pure subjectivity of me who experiencing it. So therefore, in reality, it is consciousness. So even though it's not conscious on its own, and this is where we return the beauty to being human. We are perhaps the only species out there, if we can call ourselves that, who are embedded with that ability, with that capacity. This is why in all laws, in all epics, in all most ancient, even those civilizations that don't exist and left us written accounts, composed accounts, some of which was passed on orally from generation to generation until were written down, everything is settled at the level of human life. Why? Well, you figure it out why. You tell me why. Right? Remember we spoke about it even in this format, similar to this format, when there was question about these epochs and the so-called ages, right? Yugas. And it felt fitting to bring this reminder how, for example, classically, the Yugas viewed. How in the Golden Age, in Sat Yuga, every realm exists and inhabited by its inhabitants in accord with the realms, with the boundaries of the realms. Everyone, as it were, belongs to the realm of that strata of creation. Everyone does what belongs to one's realm. And then it begins to get perplexed. And finally, it will perplex to such degree where the conflict that is maintained, let's say, don't get me wrong here, even in the Sat Yuga, the powers of light and powers of darkness inhibit their respective realms. It's not that they don't exist. It will be incorrect perspective, and it is not spoken at all, but spoken very clearly in that classical, let's say, account of how the beings of light and beings of darkness coexist in the universal realm. What characterizes the Golden Age, that's Sat Yuga, is that because they all exist in the realms assigned to each creatures, then that in itself is considered to be the most balanced state of affairs. But in Kali Yuga, it reaches the proportions where the realm of darkness, let's say, or realms of light, is now being settled at the level of human affair. So it goes these gradations. I'm just like, because we spoke about it, I just wanted to bring this in relation to this conversation in response to this particular inquiry you brought out, Ebony. In our current day and age, it is at the level of the human being, each and every one of us. So in other words, none of us are exempt. Every human being here is faced with that existential quest where we, whether we know it or not, become the arena, become the place where the forces of light and darkness meet, and how they have that face off. And it's an insignificant, minute, little whatever, nitty gritty, everyday life, little friction, little conversation, little argument in the kitchen with the siblings, with the nearest and dearest, to the what happens at the collective state of affairs of the nations. It all reflects that same. Wherever can be won, whatever balance can be brought, restored. So, to me, what you brought out in this inquiry here simply feels that that narrative, what you call dystopian here, can be easily applied to the very narrative of existence itself, our existence. So it's not really what is there constantly attempts at usurping our freedom, boxing, framing us, confining us. That in itself is, yes, absolutely. As I have often said, whenever we hear something, the first healthy response, is this a propaganda? Am I being, is my mental field being exercised as a fertile ground to win my consciousness into some perspective? And that, whatever, mental hacking, consciousness hacking here happens all the time. So what I'd like to maybe still go back to the why I feel like responding to this. By the way, I wouldn't place astrology in the same line with AI, right? And what otherwise you listed here as what seems rigid, predetermined, locked in metrics, like technology. Astrology can be viewed like that, but really proper understanding of astrology is a science of light. So it's not really some kind of a rigid way of how we are confined by trajectory of the movement of the planets, which exert the, what we have earlier just spoken, influence not from out there, but from within, because that's what our biological body is. Our body is made of light. And this body of light is maintained by breath. And so every cycle is measured by breath. This is why breath is one of the unit of the measure of time in Indian civilization. A very important measure of unit of measure of time, because it has many connotations, of course, and most importantly, the suspension of breath upon inhalation and upon exhalation. So this astrology, in a way, is out there, so to speak, or the chart, whether the birth chart or the current transits, can be seen as that insight into that what already unfolds anyway at the level of this so-called biological light. You see, a slip of a tongue, biological life, but it's biological light. So this biological life here is an expression of light, and light expresses itself at the biological level. That's the deeper meaning of the life force in the body. Life force is consciousness, light, and it illumines everything, every cell in the body and every impression. It has that function. So astrology linked to that, astrology itself is a science of light, jyotish, jyotir, light, jyotish, the science of light. So in other words, it's not a science of a physical body locked in metric system, confined by the planetary movements, defining all our actions and moves, and determines who we like, who don't like, whom we will live our life, whom we'll marry, divorce, and what we will do as an occupation. No. All these are hues. All these are different colors as they refract through our neurophysiology. But in essence, it's the light. And that's why we speak about it as light. So this is what our life is. In a true astrology, tapping into that is that understanding. So it's not viewing astrology in this narrowing terms. Some people like to know what's going to happen to them, what to prepare, what's the best time. Why not? Very on a practical level, one should use astrology. Why not? It's not a mumbo jumbo science. There's a lot of mumbo jumbo science. There's a lot of pseudoscience out there today, even in the name of science. Astrology has proven itself many times over to be a very useful way of understanding who we are at a psychological level, if nothing else.